Okay, here we are at the Kenosha Public Museum, and they got a great gallery. They always change out their upper gallery, and I'm with your name.
Paul Tabili.
Paul, nice to see you. You are responsible for, and what exhibit do we have here at the Kenosha Public?
Well, it's called Monsters, Mutants and Madmen, and it's basically a collection of science fiction movie posters from mostly the 50s and 60s from my personal collection.
Well, let's go on in and check out the collection. So this is the whole, or actually part of the gallery that's here, and I am just amazed how many posters is this. Is this your full collection, or do you have even more?
No, this is actually a pretty small part of my collection. I have about a total of over 900 movie posters at this point. We have 75 here on display, and these are all science fiction posters, so my collection ranges over. Mostly it's split pretty evenly between horror and science fiction type posters and then what you call exploitation movie posters.
Although one thing about it just brings back so much memories, and the movies you just don't see anymore. We got Empire of the Ants and Food of the Gods. I mean, you probably get a lot of response from people coming to you.
We've actually got a lot of good response. I've gotten some really nice personal messages on Facebook from people, and yeah, it seems to have been pretty successful. Right here we have a display of posters of movies by Bert I. Gordon, who was actually born and raised in Kenosha. Went out to Hollywood, got in the movie business, and made a series of low-budget science fiction movies in the 50s, such as Amazing Colossal Man, Attack of the Puppet People, are some of his bigger titles. He went on to make movies throughout the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s before retiring.
And what's kind of neat also here, you got a lot of descriptions of each under in each posters. It sort of gives a synopsis of the movie.
Yeah, I wrote these all up to each tag gives you a little description of what the movie is basically about, behind the scenes trivia or facts or interesting things about each movie. So.
Okay, Paul, and looking at we're in the sort of in the sci-fi area, but every poster that I've been seeing, there's that artistic piece to it, where it's not like they just slapped it all together. There was actually, before computers, they were hand-drawn or hand-painted, correct?
Yeah, back in the golden age, all these posters were hand-painted by extremely talented artists. Most of the movie posters since the 80s and up to today, a lot of them are, just utilize photographs or like Photoshop type composite images. These are all, hand painted, hand drawn, and that's one of the things that attracted me to collecting the posters in the first place, is just how colorful and beautiful the artwork is.
Well, what do we got behind us?
This poster in particular, First Spaceship on Venus, this is a really interesting movie because it's a German-Polish co-production. It was made in the early 60s, and it's kind of neglected and not very well known, but it's actually kind of interesting because it has a lot of elements of later science fiction, like Star Trek, 2001, even Star Wars. They have a little R2-D2-like robot. The flight crew on the spaceship are racially and sexually diverse. There's a couple of plot elements that were later used in Stanley Kubrick's 2001. They dig up a communications device in the Gobi Desert that turns out to have been planted by aliens, which sends them on a voyage to another planet. And they even do a EVA repair mission while on their journey, similar to 2001. So it's kind of a neat movie, and could use a little extra PR.
What got you started into collecting all these posters?
Well, like a lot of people my age, when I was a kid, I had posters on my wall of Frankenstein and Dracula, basically, that I bought at Pier 1. But it wasn't until it was the early 80s, I was at an antique shop in Milwaukee, and I saw a couple of actual original theatrical movie posters, and it had never really dawned on me before that they were out there and could be collected. So that kind of got me started. And I collected up through the 80s and 90s mostly by mail order, and then when eBay came around, that was really what kicked it into gear.
And would you say these are the original posters?
These are all original theatrical movie posters. Most of them actually hung in a theater somewhere. A lot of them have, pinholes or little defects like that, but minor damage is usually not considered a major flaw to collectors, because for some collectors it actually kind of shows their authenticity. And the fact that they're used and have a few pinholes or a few little smudge marks, ideally people will like posters that are nice, crisp, near mint, but I do myself. But a few minor flaws, I actually kind of give it a little richness to it.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, Paul, I noticed on your shirt, and you got the poster of that. And that's got to be hard to find as shirts, or you probably get them custom made.
They released this T-shirt to coincide with the Blu-ray release of the movie, so of course I had to have a T-shirt for myself. This is an interesting example of the kind of movies that were made, back in the day, explicitly to play in drive-in theaters. I mean, most of the big movies made by the big studios, they were designed to play at the big theaters in the downtowns of the big cities. There were a whole army of independent producers in the 50s, 60s, and 70s who were making these movies very cheaply, strictly to play drive-ins. So they were aimed at, teenagers, young adults. This movie was shot in Florida. A lot of people might not realize it, but Florida was actually quite a hotbed of independent movie making back in the 60s and 70s. They made a lot of biker movies and science fiction movies and horror movies and nudist camp movies and things like that. So this was shot independently in Florida. It flopped on its first release, so a couple years later they dusted it off, retitled it Blood Waters of Dr. Z, and re-released it again to try to recoup some of their investment, which was actually not uncommon tactic back in those days. The movie flopped the first time, you make a new poster, put a new title on it, and put it out there again. Hope people don't realize that they already saw this turkey once.
Yeah. And another thing, Paul, again, we talked about how great artistic, but also the movies as well. What do you feel about the movies today compared to the movies that we're displaying here?
Well, I guess I'm kind of biased because I grew up with these kind of movies and in older classic Hollywood movies. I still go see new movies, but I have to say I probably most of the movies I watch are like pre 1990 for sure. Probably pre 1980 really for the most part, but
well, you can really see the creativity in these, not in the posters, but then in the movies, their ideas.
Well, that's one of the things that I like about a lot of these low budget movies is that since they didn't have a lot of money, they usually would have to use their ingenuity or come up with other ways of getting your attention and keeping you entertained rather than just spending a lot of money on special effects and some of the movies are so crudely constructed and fail to follow the normal rules of film editing and such, so they actually sort of create their own sort of dream world sometimes that can be also quite interesting, even though the movies themselves are technically, can be pretty bad. They can still be quite interesting just to observe, the strange way that they're cobbled together, sort of.
Do you feel the posters match the movie?
Well, in a lot of cases, this is sort of a topic among poster collectors because, a lot of these movies didn't have the budget, so the posters in many cases are, what we call cheaters. They tempt you with a really exciting image that the movie really never lives up to.
So I'm also feeling like a historical significance among these, as far as like drive-ins were big, and the kind of categories of movies that were made that we just don't see today.
Yeah. Well, what used to be independent films and exploitation films have kind of gotten co-opted over the years. A lot of these movies, when they were originally made and played, were sort of considered disreputable. You know, they didn't play the big A movie houses, and were usually relegated to the drive-ins and the neighborhood theaters. And over the years, Hollywood has sort of co-opted the you know, those kind of exploitation type movies. So the market for independent productions like these pretty much dried up in the 70s and 80s. And then, of course, with VHS coming out and drive-ins closing and all those other factors, independent, you know, what they call independent movie making now, it's nothing like it was. If you read up on the stories of some of these people who are making these old indie movies in the 50s and 60s, I mean, some of the stories behind the movies are actually more interesting than the movies themselves.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for showing us around here, and it's probably one of the best exhibits I've seen here at the Kenosha Public Museum, and thank the Kenosha Public Museum for putting this on as well. When is this going to be displayed up till?
The show runs through Sunday, February 19th, so there's still a couple of weeks for people to get in and see it.
Is there a website that displays some of your collection, or not at this time?
No, you can look me up on Facebook, and I do have a couple of photo galleries of movie posters that can be seen by the public at large. So if you are interested, look me up on Facebook and look into my movie poster photo gallery.
I gotta ask you, is there one poster that you don't have that you want?
I've got a list.
So 900 and counting. So okay.
Yeah, it's slowed down a lot since the early 2000s. The amount of material out there is dried up. A lot of things changed hands in the early 2000s, and now people are sitting on it. So, and the prices continue to go up. So it's making the rarer, more desirable pieces even more rare and desirable and expensive. So I still buy probably a couple of posters every month.
Well, once again, this is an excellent, and I will stress, an art gallery of exhibit of movie posters and history to talk about the old drive-ins and the era that was in, and especially Yog Monster from Space. So, Paul, we thank you so much for displaying your poster collection. So come on down to the Kenosha Public Museum, and thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Jay.